welcome to session 4, different perspectives on the new retail and food and beverage. So with us are two experts to talk about this. Very privileged to have two CEOs. I feel very humbled actually to be in the presence of two CEOs. Welcome to Walter Sieb from HMS Host and Kevin Zajac from Ground Control. So I think where we'd like to start is right at the top. In the session question, if you like, is this idea of a different perspective on new retail and food and beverage going forward into the future. If I could ask this question of you, Walter, first of all, do you see a different perspective on the role of F&B and retail going forward? Is the future different? Is it the same? Is it a little bit the same? Is it very, very different? Could you just give us your sort of headline thoughts on that?
Sure, of course. I think it also it's a little bit unknown at the moment. Really, nobody knows where the world will be in the next 12 to 24 months. And I think also we need to make a distinction between different parts of the world as well. So that's what we're seeing. Consumers in Asia certainly behave differently than consumers like in India, Europe, or even the US. And so I think there's not a universal answer to that question. But what I do believe is that there will probably a much faster shift that we expected from the past. And what I mean by that is in most of the parts, the retail sales on airports been already under pressure. And if I say retail sales, I mean sales per passenger in retail, whilst food and beverage over the last years did very well. And I also have to say that the food and beverage industry did a tremendous job increasing the quality of products, but also the concepts in airports around the globe. So having said this, I think instead of the previous model, I think there will be new models moving forward in the future. But having said this, I think in the end it comes down to that we need to think from the consumer to the kitchen and not from the kitchen to the consumer. And what I mean by that is that we need to have the right offer in different price levels, but also in different service styles across different regions in the world. And whilst retail is more a global business, I do believe food and beverage is still a very local business with local concepts, local food preferences, local tastes and flavors, local suppliers and producers. So I think there's much more in the bite than generally speaking in retail.
Okay, thank you, Walter. And Kevin, what's your thought on that future? Different, same, a little bit different, very different?
Yeah, I tend to agree with Walter on a couple of key points. He mentioned that there's no universal answer, and I agree with that. I mean, even he mentioned Asia. Even within Asia, you see the different countries accelerating out of COVID much faster than others, principally because there's domestic travel versus international. And I think the other key thing is the consumer to kitchen point that Walter mentioned in terms of, I think for such a long time, the F&B industry has been focused on doing what they do really well and making good product, food, drink, even experiences. But the consumer these days is changing. They're much more around what's experiential, what's fast, and that's going to drive more of the F&B requirements going forward. We've already seen in retail, and I think F&B is immune to some of this because ultimately you still have to eat and drink, and you can't buy it online. You can't buy food online in terms of consuming food online, whereas retail you can. But I think the changing consumer is really going to have an influence over how the F&B evolves over the next, I'm going to say 2-3 years, because I think anyone that's talking about 5 years or more down the track these days is probably has a time horizon that's not in line with what needs to be discussed.
Right. Now, I'm interested in this point, Walter, you mentioned there about local. Obviously, within our industry, the idea of localization in some sense, whether it's retail, whether it's the airport itself, whether it's in the food as well, is this sense that there's a big opportunity to really look at what's on your doorstep and to bring that into the airport. Now, how do you reconcile that with a kind of, the master concession approach, if you like, where there's a big brands and there's local brands, and you might need to sort of find that local operator who may not be so familiar with the airport environment. I mean, if that's the opportunity, do we need to do something different to make it more easy to happen, to bring in local guys?
I'm not sure if that's the answer. It could be certainly one answer, but I'm not saying that's the answer. In the end, if you work with global companies, and I know Kevin worked before with Emirates Leisure, I work with HMS Host International. I think big companies have the skill set and the science and the art to bring local concepts or high street concepts to airport environments. I think in the complexity where we are today with logistics, food safety, and other things, I think it's a little bit too easy to think we take high street operators, put them in airport environments, and believe they can make money and pay competitive concession fees. So you see many examples around the globe where local operators think airport business is easy to operate, and they bid very high rents. Of course, footfall is there, and they have challenges to survive. And then if something happens like COVID, then it gets even more dramatic for those operators. So I do believe also in my opinion at least, and I traveled a lot over the last 27 years as I'm in the industry, I think the best concession programs is always a mix between international concepts, then I say local concepts and custom designed concepts / experiences. And here again, that's not a universal answer. If I see in Asia, for instance, people have more tendencies to brands, more in retail, but also in food and beverage. It gives them safety. Whilst in Europe, we look much more to the localization, the local food, like if you take an airport like Zurich or what we do in Amsterdam, or even Finland, Scandinavian design, Scandinavian food, or even the UK where you are based. You see the traditional UK concepts of pubs. That's a different approach. So I think that's a little bit where the landscape is. So I think also for concession owners, it's really the question where you want to play and what is your skill set as concession owners as well. So if you are like a landlord, you need professional operators who really can support you. If you have a big team and you just find tenants, but then you need to have a different skill set in your commercial department as well. So I think in the end, it's a mixture of different things. It's about where you want to be as an airport, where you want to be as a food and beverage concessionaire. And then I think in the end, and it sounds always very old-fashioned, but if you really work well together in true partnership, you always find a solution for the specific spot. And I call it, simple speaking, there's no cookie-cutter approach that we can do the same in San Francisco like we do in London or in Zurich, Frankfurt, Amsterdam, or Ho Chi Minh, or in Beijing, or Jakarta, or even Sydney, or Oakland. So I think we need to be mindful, and we shouldn't forget that.
Okay, thanks, Walter. And Kevin, in terms of that localization opportunity, shall we say, and going forward, have you got any thoughts on how to work with it, to exploit it? Are we doing enough there?
I think we've got to be a little bit careful of overcomplicating this and getting too cute here. I mean, I've got my own little anagram of what I think the mega trends are, and it's SHELF P, SHELF-P. And I think sustainable is one, where it's around the evolution of plant-based and zero waste, healthy, clean and nutritious, and local, seasonal and transparent. And I think they are the mega trends. And people want to do the right things by the planet. They're increasingly wanting to do the right things by their local communities, and obviously want to do the right things by their bodies. But let's not overcomplicate it from a cuisine perspective, because you can achieve all of those or some of those, whether you're cooking British, Indian, Chinese, Moroccan, whatever. I think where the differentiators are going to lie going forward is more in the process. And that's where the E and the F come in for me. It's either experiential or it's fast. So the explosion of delivery is all on the back of fast. I'm too busy to go out at lunchtime at work, so I'm going to call someone. They're going to bring me my food while I continue working on whatever it is I'm working on. Whereas experiential is much more around the immersion. It's going out with friends. It's dining together. All of those things that are coming together, which I agree with Walter. I think that there's going to still be elements of those in the airport, but it's going to be much more important around being fast and convenient and getting that right. And the overriding part of the P for me is personalization, which effectively says, give me what I want, how I want it. So if I want healthy and fast, give me the options to get healthy and fast. Whatever healthy means to me, I want to be able to choose. And I think that's where we really need to get better as F&B operators in providing options for that. Now, in the retail world, they talk a lot about omni-channel and multi-channel. I think that jargon's overused a little bit, because I think ultimately it's still all about, as a consumer, I want what I want when I want it, and that's not changed in eternity.
Switch tack slightly on about this relationship between food and beverage and retail. Obviously, to the consumer, it's all one journey, all one experience. They may shop, they may have a coffee, they do it all together. Traditionally, there's been this kind of almost separation, I would call it, between, from a tender stage, the F&B's over here, separate tender, separate planning, separate location. And obviously, there are changes around and new opinions around more integrated retail and F&B, even to the point of like hybrid concepts of putting, F&B within stores and so on. So you've got a shopping experience and a dining experience all in one. Do you think the future is a kind of about trying to sort of blur these boundaries between retail and F&B and at every step and every stage? And ask first Walter that question. Is there a blurring? Is that a good thing to happen in the future?
Yeah, I think it's already out there, and I think sometimes on the high street it's much longer going on blurring. And when we do, I'm on a side note, I'm the chairman of the Food Service Institute Netherlands, and we do a lot of research. So it's a knowledge institute. And we see this blurring already happening for years. In our industry, unfortunately, we try to be resilient and want to stick to the old dogmas. But, I tell you in the end, how you change things, you need to have progressive concessionaires and you need to have progressive landlords or business partners. So we done I can give you many examples, but on Schiphol we did Café Chocolat. So it's an integration between coffee and chocolate. And we do about 20% of the sales is chocolate, and not so much to compete with the chocolate, but just to give a different experience. But we had in Zurich Baccaro, a wine bar with food. It was on landside. So you can see many different examples, but we still be too reluctant. And in the end, I call it's the race for space. So everybody's try to compete on the square meters, want to hold on to the square meters, but not a lot of people have the flexibility in their mind that sometimes sharing, it's not only caring, but sharing can put up the equation as well. Mm-hmm. So then you need people thinking out of the box and starting things, and then you will see gradually it happening. Unfortunately, so far, our industry is not designed like that. And funny enough, it's quite interesting. If you see airport planning, Portland is in airport planning as well. It's for years in advance. But then, even if it's years in advance, we still don't change it last minute. We still calculate with the old square meter ratio how much retail you need, how much food and beverage, how much commercial, how much duty free. But the world is changing as well. But I don't see a lot of innovative movements there as well. So it will take time. I never give up hope, but I think we are much slower than what happens on the high street.
Yeah, and Kevin, would you have some thoughts on that?
Lots of thoughts on that. It's probably one of the biggest areas of opportunity in my perspective. I mean, simple convenience will ultimately end up the domain of online retail. There's 1.8 billion people that are purchasing goods online. Over 60% of shopping occasions begin online, and 50% of consumers shop more online than they do in store. And we've seen it in the retail recently with DFS when they smashed their previous one-day sales record in the beauty category in a 1-hour live streaming. So that shows you that this can happen and should be happening in travel retail. And I think you have to think about the retailer and where their challenges are. If I just think about my experience as a consumer, as a traveler, if I'm flying to Australia and I want to buy a bottle of alcohol, I go to a duty-free retailer in an airport. 90% of the products are homogenous. So I'm frustrated already. I then go and buy that product. It gets put in a step bag. I go to the gate to board my plane. That bag gets taken away from me. It then goes to somewhere in the cargo and the storage. And when I get to Australia, I have to wait for that bag to come out with the rest of the luggage. Now, as a traveler who rarely takes anything more than hand luggage, that's a frustration. That's an extra half an hour that I've got to wait for that 1 or 2 bottles that I bought in wherever airport. Here's my alternative. I log on to an Australian retailer website. They've already got my details. I then say, this is the product that I want. Let's say I'm traveling to Melbourne instead of Sydney. So I say, this is the hotel I'm staying at. They do all of that while I'm on my 14-hour trip, and I arrive to the hotel and it's already there, sometimes in the room or at worst at reception, and they say, there's a parcel here for you, Mr. Zajac. 99 times out of 100, I'm going to choose that option because it's just more convenient for me. And I think that's where the retailers have really got a challenge, because when you're now shopping bricks and mortar, or when I'm shopping bricks and mortar, I want something different. I want something unique. I want to be immersed in the brand. I want to be educated with the brand. Sell to me, talk to me, but still let me have my option as to how I want to buy. And that's happening everywhere. Downtown, 50% of consumers go to shopping centres to purchase. 85% of them now are going to be with friends and family. And even the Chinese consumer, where all the retailers are fondling over and making changes to get to them, even they're now moving to online. And their travel experience is more about experiences and sampling something new. So as online becomes more mainstream, shopping or going to the shops is less about shopping. And we've seen in the retail world that merging of retail and F&B. In a few places, the famous ones are Tiffany's Blue Box Cafe and Gucci's Osteria, intersect by Lexus, which had, I think, a 12-course tasting menu that changed daily, but you couldn't actually buy a Lexus or go for a test drive in that store. So there's been quite a few in the downtown section, less so in the airport. I mean, there's a couple that Walter mentioned. There's the Enrique Thomas experience in Barcelona, which I've enjoyed, and Vino Volo. But it hasn't really taken off. And it's really important. I'm sorry, I'll keep going on this for a while, but it's really important because passengers who are intentional about making purchases, and it's not just F&B, are much more likely to spend more. And the stats show that I think it's 3 times more for F&B and 6 to 7 times more for retail. So my view is that, and I think Walter's saying the same thing, airport operators and brands now have a choice. They can continue to do so for many, many years and wait for things to filter into the airport, or I think they should now take this opportunity to be drivers of change, not just within their airport or local community or even within travel retail. I think there's enough power in there to drive the global retail industry. And I think F&B operators should be marketing ourselves to be experienced partners to retailers. And I think airports really need to be fostering those relationships to establishing themselves as shopping and dining destinations.
I'm hearing that maybe where F&B has trying to be pushed forward and be innovative in some senses, maybe retail is a little bit behind, and therefore the whole passenger journey maybe isn't as good as it could be, because it's kind of like not balanced, if you like, between what the traditional retail experience and, as you say, shift from retail and buying behaviors to an online world. So do you think then, is there, I mean, if that's true, is it true?
I think it's true, but in the end, it's everybody talks about passenger journey, huh? And in the end, it's not retail or food and beverage, but it's also the airline, it's security, it's parking. It's already when you order your ticket online, that always counts to the passenger journey. And what I see, and I hope Kevin forgives me if I say it, even Emirates, when you own the airport, you own the airline, you own the F&B, you own the duty free, even there they've been not able, with all respect, I'm not rude again, was difficult to integrate in the total passenger journey as well. So in the end, as long as everybody sits on their own thing, we can talk forever about passenger journey, but if we're not putting the whole equation together, then I think we stick to, there's a nice saying, if you always do what you always did, you always get what you always got. And in the end, that's what it is. And, the airlines want to see it on the passengers' data. The airports everybody wants to own the data. You have the security, this and that. But, the whole journey is already starting from home. But also not even when you leave the airport, also when you go home or with the destination, et cetera, et cetera. So I think there's still a lot of thinking and work to do. And I said this many times also on conferences, and everybody agrees, but then nothing happens, is that we need to work much better together.
Right. Okay. And Kevin, would you say there is an opportunity in airport, if you like, operators at a very senior level, if you like, need to sort of say, actually, we need to look outside learn lessons from other places like the great concepts that you mentioned and so on, and say, now's the opportunity, now's the time to get to roll our sleeves up and really change what we do, change the experience?
Yeah, it depends really. If the airports want to continue to just have a steady income stream and mags and concessions and percentage rents are their main objective, then continue to do what you're doing. That's a fair strategy. However, if they want to become all things that they say they want to be, and that's we want to be local, we want to be world class, and we want to do all those things, then they have to change. And I agree with Walter. I'm not going to mention the locations, but as an outsider, it's incredibly strange, right? If you're a traveler and you're going, well, the online travel agent has my information, the airline has my information, the duty-free operator has my information, the airport and security, and yes, they're not bundled in the same thing, but they all have information. You put all that together and it's much richer than what anything is downtown. Yeah. You get my passenger profile from whether it's Emirates or Singapore Airlines. You know what I've purchased at the duty-free locations previously. You know when I'm traveling. You know whether I'm traveling by myself or with my family. You have that, and you have got such a powerful information database. The problem is no one's keen to share it. Yeah. And therefore, no one's actually benefiting from that.
Yeah.
And but I also agree to Kevin's point. In the end, I say this from our side as a company. In the end, what I say to airports or concession owners is that you need to tell me what you want to achieve. What is your strategy? So we can play all roles. But with all respect, we are not determining the strategy. It's not our real estate. It's not our venue. So and I said this many times. I don't have an opinion if it's good or bad, if it's concession fees or mags or whatever it is. I have no opinion. So we can play all different games. But in the end, you need to determine where you want to be. And then if you determine your strategy, and that counts for everyone and for every business, then you can look for the partners who can play a part in that strategy. But I think that's the main point. And we see already. If you look at the numbers, is the US, they have a different airport model, total different airports, since they have much less retail and duty free, of course, than airports in Asia or airports in Europe. And again, I'm not judging, but you see different parts of the world again have different models and different economics.
Yeah, so that's these are all really good points, and touching on something right at the core of things, which is this idea of an airport having a strategy for where it thinks its journey is going to be, its experience, its brand, where its commercial revenue opportunity is indeed. So do you think airports are kind of thinking about strategies enough, first of all, but if they are thinking about strategies, are they far enough ahead in the future? I think you made the point, Walter, that sometimes we work on projects many years in advance, and yet the thinking that is used to develop those projects is old when it starts and continues to get older with every year as we get closer to the opening. So do you think there's something that needs to change about the way that airports put together their sort of future strategies?
I think it's not only airports, but also the advisors. I think in the end, my opinion, I say this to many airports, when you see greenfield airports, and frankly speaking, in Europe, we don't build any new airports. We have enough, but like in India, Asia, you need to put in much more flexibility. And in the end, it costs you more capex. But in the end, what I tell airports, it's up to you, it's your money. But if you build in the flexibility, especially from an infrastructure standpoint, you can easily change spaces and utilization of spaces later on. But once the airport is built, we know all this with fire departments and all complications. It's very difficult to put in, let's say, retail area, let's phrase it, then later food and beverage, where you need exhaust and other things. And or if you change a food and beverage space to retail, the airport did all the investment in infrastructure and said, oh, now what we do, we write it off or we shut it down or whatever it is. So I think we need to be much more in our mind, flexibility. And
look, I'm going to come to you on this, Kevin, in a moment, but I just wanted to quickly pick up on a couple of points, Walter. We actually, as designers, it's interesting. We often talk about this flexibility. So we are often the bearers of bad news. We're saying, spend some money now. You'll be glad you did later on, but unfortunately, it's very much the case that that idea of, well, we don't need to build that far ahead, right? Why should we do it? There's a lack of certainty around what you're saying. It's a bit of a guess. So, Kevin, do you think that airports are sort of thinking enough about the future when they think about the commercial experiences they develop, retail, F&B, the whole story?
Yeah, I think they are, and as Walter said, the airport F&B experience is much better than it was 10 years ago. What I think COVID and also this ghost kitchen and all this automation has caused us all to do, let's be honest, is rethink about how we can do things better. And I'm 100% supporter of the flexible concept and flexibility, because in many parts of the world, and travel retail is not immune. Something that's cool in February 2020 may be out of fashion by March 2021. So I think we've spent a fair bit of time as well over the last 6 months in looking at how we can help guide airports and operators as well as to how to be more flexible in their setup. And we did a recent case study for an airport in Australia, and in 25% less space, we were able to deliver the same offer. And it was 8 F&B units, about 2,500 square meters. So the same offer, the same number of covers, same F&B units in 25% less space. And they were doing roughly 120 transactions per hour per unit. So they were busy and hefty. Now, this is great for the operator because that reduces the capex by about 30% and opex between 15 and 20%. But it's also great for the airport because they've now got 25% additional space. So whether that's right now for social distancing or additional seating, or for future F&B, or for future retail, as and when they need it, and for both the airport and the operator, that new design and that new setup results in about 40% less power and 70% less water. And we all know how important the environmental credentials are for operators, but in particular airports these days. So it's really having a look at how we can redesign the spaces used. And I think we've extended that as well to go, how do we develop concepts that front of house, you can have a coffee shop that in the morning from 7 o'clock to 11 a.m. is doing a rip-roaring trade, and then at the flick of a switch can convert over to potentially a cocktail bar or something. So we've actually developed some designs that have done that, using some smart technology, content management systems, new LED lighting, etc. And then the other bit that we've developed is how do we extend that? So let's say we're opening an Asian restaurant in a location and we build it on this system. And in 12 months down the track, potentially the demographic has changed or that airline has moved to another terminal. That's a headache for everybody. That's a massive headache for the operator and it's a headache for the airport. Now with this new technology, within a week, that can be changed completely to Mexican cantina, for example. So it's how do we build and design concepts that actually are much more flexible, that can be used for different reasons as the airport continues its evolution.
Great. Now,
to be fair enough to airports, and I hope you allow me to say that is, I also don't want to push it always on airports. Airports sometimes are also dependent. They're dependent on airlines, as an example. Self-service check-in luggage. How far is an airline in their technology? But also the governments. Biometric passport control and that kind of things. So in a sense, it's a multiple layer approach. So it's not only the airports. I just want to say this also positive about the airport. It seems always that they are not moving or they are slow there, but they're also depending on many other parties in the whole value chain, or I call it the value chain as well. So that's not easy, and things are moving fast as well. 10 years ago, we had all our printed boarded pass, and we got a whole map from the travel agent sent at home when you went on vacation. And the only thing now, as Kevin said before, the only thing you take with you is your smartphone, and that's it, and nothing else.
So do you think then, given the pace of change and lots of great ideas and learning from different experiments, like you say, Kevin, lots of interesting stuff where we've found an interesting way of doing things, it's different. Do you think, going forward, how do we as an industry, if you like, take advantage of all these good ideas and create a conversation, which, as you said, earlier on, Walter, was we seem to talk about the same things a lot, and we go around in a circle and we come back to the same points, like information sharing and all the rest of it, and we don't seem to break out. So is there something we need to do differently to sort of take advantage of innovation? What can we do as partners, if you like, in defining future experiences, future commercial opportunities, future airports, indeed? Is there something we need to be doing differently?
Yeah, the short answer is yes, because we have been talking about this for quite some time. And I think it probably revolves around collaboration and coming to the realization that something needs to be done differently. Now, the interesting thing for me, and Walter might be able to shed more light on this than what I do, but I'm wondering how many people are going to be around in the next 12 months to actually facilitate this and actually carry some of this forward. I keep reading, lots of people being furloughed and let go and whatnot. So that's going to be a challenge, but at the same time, it may be an opportunity. And, I think Ibrahim said that, we need stage managers and we need data scientists as opposed to people that can do a commercial lease negotiation. And I wholeheartedly agree with him. I think let's use this tragic situation, and it is tragic for the industry. There's no two ways about this. But to really sit down and go, well, what are the new players we need in this play? Who are the people that should be coming together to facilitate these conversations, to see how we move from an okay offer to something that's truly world-class?
Okay, and Walter, what would you think about a different way of doing things that allows us to get?
I give you two answers. I agree. We're in a situation which is unprecedented, and nobody knows where we go. And in those moments, it's a strange moment, since I tell you, everybody is fighting for survival. No one is in a beauty contest anymore. We just fight for survival. It doesn't matter if it's concessionaires, airports, airlines, doesn't matter what it is. So it's not the most perfect moment to experiment. It's just to survive in the end and see where we go. But having said this, is we also working with airports where we said, let's, if you see big companies, I call it an R&D budget. They do R&D budgets. Huh? So if you have a big airport and you have an operator who operates not only one or two spaces, and again, don't misunderstand me that I'm now do a statement for master concessionaires, but if you have bigger players in airports, then you can allocate certain spaces where you share the risk and you do different things to learn from it. Huh? It's like an R&D budget. But then you need to do different business mechanics instead of to make it a success. So then you say, instead of it's a 5-year contract or 7-year contract, whatever it is, you say, okay, let's put something in there. Let's say for 3 years. If it works, great, we let it there. If it not works, we tear it down, we try something else. We share the risk on the investment or whatever the business mechanics are. But then you're sitting in there together. But if you want to do that and you say, okay, that's your MEG and that's your concession fee and that's that and that and that, then you get, of course, a lot of reluctant answers. Nobody wanted to be there. And luckily, we have some of our clients which are thinking that progressive. Mm-hmm. But there are only yet out a few there, which is great. But, I said it's always, we have a sustainability program, and our slogan is, you need to start somewhere. So my point is, you need to start somewhere. You can't change the world in one day. So I see good signs. The current situation is not helpful, of course, for no one. So also I think we need to be a little bit patient. And I keep saying this, at this stage, we are, I don't want to call it we are at war, but we fight for survival, nothing more and nothing less.
And I agree. I mean, everyone right now is in almost a reactionary stage. The main conversations are around commercial rents. They're around people, and they're around suppliers and banks, and how do we get enough money to keep all that continuing. I think there are airports that are genuine, but I think the following could help, and I think, having longer concession terms, so maybe 9 years, but potentially split them 3 by 3 by 3, requiring reinvestment or a commitment to change if the concept's not working, but also spreading out that financial element, particularly for operators. I've been in circumstances where I've had an absolutely boom year through not much that I've done, I'll be honest. And then the next year it's been horrible. And you sit there and you're like, well, why should I be rewarded or penalized for all of these external factors? But if you spread that over 3 or 4 or 5 years, you're much more comfortable. And I think this is where the COVID issue was really hit. If you have a 12 or 15-year contract, a year of pain, maybe not as painful as what it is this year, is sustainable, or you can do something about it. But if you've got a concession that finishes next year and this is your last year, then you're gone. So I think that's, and I agree with Walter on the equity side. I've been pushing the equity piece for quite some time, where airports should take, and I don't mean shareholdings, but potentially a share of profits, not just a share of revenues on the successes of particular concepts. And R&D is another way of describing that.
So that's interesting. What you're both talking about there is something that's been a theme, if you like, that's been carrying through some of the retail conversations, the idea of experimentation, a sort of loosening, the ability to try new things, fail, to succeed, to fail quickly and move on. But that sense of we need to do those things, and that's something that you feel is an opportunity for F&B as well, to be sort of somehow in an environment where it's easier to try new stuff and learn from new stuff. And is that fair to say that we need, that could be part of our future? Walter?
You also know what fail means, huh?
Yeah.
First attempt in learning, that's fail. Yeah. And I think we shouldn't be scared to fail or make mistakes. Otherwise, even as a human society, we wouldn't progress. We still would live in caves, I always say. But in the end, you need to look at the total picture. And I'm from origin, I'm a chef, so I look like a cake. So you can't only have the raisins out of the cake, but if your cake is big enough, you can have a piece which is not so great if the rest is making it up. But I come back in what it takes is courage. It takes people thinking out of the box, and that's from both sides, or maybe from 3 sides, from maybe from brands, it's also for F&B, maybe from operators, maybe from clients, from landlords or airports. And then if you be engaged in conversation, you're progressive, you find a way. Of course, you don't want to put your whole model on stake, also not as an airport. That would be stupid. Let's be frank as well. It's billions of investments, so they have shareholders as well, need to be paid back. But as I said, if you see in the light of schemes, if you may spend, I don't want to say a couple of million, and that's a strange time to talk about just wasting a couple of millions. But in normal circumstances, if it's a big airport, you can say, okay, let's try it and evaluate. And if it works, we can do more things. If it not works, okay, what was the mechanics which didn't work? Can we improve them? And then we move on. And but then you really work together.
Brilliant. Now, if you'll indulge me with one final question, it's the same question to you both. You don't know this, but Portland has a time machine, and I'm going to let you have a go. We're going to take you into the future. You can choose how far into the future you're going to go, but I want you to go into the future, step off the time machine, into the airport of the future, and describe to me, first of all, Walter, if you could. You've gone to the future, you're stepping out into an airport. What would you like to see in the sort of F&B retail world? Just describe what's the thing.
First, if I step in the future in an airport, what I want to see is I want to get rid of all the hassles, like security check, passport check, all those things. That's where it starts. And I think we all know, as we work long in the industry all together, that when your stress level is high, you don't get in the consumer mode. Your stress level is much too high. So I think that that's the first one when I look in the future. The second one, then, if I come in airports, I see much more on the retail side, more like experience centers, new products, trying products. Of course, you have the possibility also to purchase, and if it's brought to your hotel, or if it's brought to an airline seat, or wherever it's brought, I leave it in the middle. But I still think it's ridiculous to carry a bottle by yourself for 10,000 miles by hand. But anyway, and if I look at food and beverage, I think the good news is, I think in our business is, at least as long as I live, so I use the time machine until the end of my life, we need to eat and drink. So that's good news. And there I see different motives and moments. First, I think it's about experience and attention. And we do this a lot. You need to give attention to customers and also to your own staff as well. And on the other hand, you see speed. So I see a differentiation between those two things. Depends what is your motive, or what airport, or which airline, or what type of business or leisure or whatever it is, doesn't matter. But I think these two big differentiation. It's about experience and great food, and as I said before, it's about personalization, it's about premiumization, those kind of things. And then you see really functional speed. You pre-order, you pick it up, or even again it's delivered to your airline seat, and then you get great food, which keeps you fit on your journey. And I think in the end, what I believe, we can have all debates about healthy or whatever, but I think what people really want, you want to age in a way that you're fit, whatever that means. Since we don't, forgive me to say this, when I see a picture of my grandmother when she was 60, she was really a grandmother, with gray hair and a stick, and she came from the war, of course, different times. If you now see people which just retired 67 or whatever, where I live, they are probably fitter than I am. So we want to be fit, and I think that's important. I think we are not in a business to educate people, but we need to provide them options to make their own choices.
Sounds good. And just quickly before we go on to Kevin, how far into the future did you just go there, Walter?
2030.
Okay, so it's still a way off. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, and Kevin. Okay, your time machine.
Yeah, Lou, I'm pretty disappointed that if you guys had a time machine, you didn't use it before 2020, and all of this could have been avoided.
So you remember the movie 11 Monkeys, huh? That one, huh?
I mean, if only we saw this all coming. But I I'm surprised at the question, but it's quite ironic because I've just finished today an animation, a video of the airport of the future that we've just done, which I think Walter's probably encapsulated quite well, which to me just suggests or shows that we're all on the same page here. We all realize that there is an opportunity. It is about removing, and I agree, the hassles of security and the immigration checks and the whole arrival process. It's into the airport before I go to the airside. And then after that, it's really about make it about me. So if I want to have I want to have flexibility. I want to be able to choose what meal I want, whether I want to have that as I'm walking to the lounge, or whether I'm at the lounge or at the gate or at a restaurant which has a band in it, etc. So it's all about me going forward, unfortunately. But that's the way that the new millennial and the Gen Zs and the Gen Alphas are all going. So we need to deliver an airport experience. And again, it's not just the airport, it's that whole experience from the booking right through to getting through to your destination. That is what the passenger and the consumer wants. So, you know, and my time machine in terms of how many years forward, I think that has to be in the next 3 or 4 years. So yeah, I think we've got to use COVID and 2020 as a time to realize that something different needs to be done, and pretty quick smart.
Fantastic. Well, I'll get the batteries charged up and we'll try and put it on fast forward for you. Brilliant. Well, it's been absolutely fascinating. I've learned a lot, and hopefully the audience as well has learned a lot. It's been great talking to you, Walter and Kevin. So thank you for joining us, and we'll leave it there. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Have a great day.
Thank you. Thanks.
Ciao.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Ciao.